And now we're on to new business. And this is application 21-36P, 25 Talbot Lane. The 25 and 5 Talbot Lane, 475 and 551 Governor's Highway application. All right, so we've heard the public hearing. Now is our time as the commission to deliberate on this matter. So let me move this. I have to go to my notes. All right. So process-wise, I guess, well, first, does anyone have some thoughts? Anyone on the commission have thoughts they want to go into? And then, if not, I've got notes as to what findings to be making. Jack,
We
would
should
you-
probably start with the finding on the intervener's petition.
So that would be to be deciding whether or not the proposed conduct will cause the unreasonable pollution, impairment, or destruction of air, water, or natural resources of the state, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. I'm going to, as I did with the initial acceptance of the petition for intervening, going to word this in the positive, that I'm going to word it as a finding that there is going to be a reasonable likelihood to have unreasonable pollution, impairment, or destroy. The reason I'm wording it that way, which has been recommended by many people, is if you word it that way, if it passes, then you have a finding that there is a reasonable likelihood of unreasonable polluting. If it fails, then it failed and it's done. If you word it the other way, which some people have recommended but most people do not, if you word the finding of it that did not do it and it passes, then there's a finding that it is not reasonably likely. But if it fails, there's still no finding that it is reasonably likely.
Okay,
So it's a much cleaner by wording it in the affirmative. So,
everyone on the commission understand, would you like to make that motion, and then we would have discussion on that? Okay,
so move that based on the record presented in the public hearing, that the proposed conduct will cause unreasonable pollution, impairment, or destruction of the air, water, or other natural resources of the state, specifically in the jurisdiction of this commission, the wetlands and watercourses.
all right. Is there a second to Jack's motion so that we can open discussion?
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you. All right. So now the commission, we should discuss, or people should put out their thoughts about whether or not, where you stand about what was presented to you and what you heard about that claim. Okay? Is this making sense? I know this is an odd, it's a tough way to do the wording, but, so we're speaking now to whether or not the claim was made and whether or not there's likely to be that unreasonable harm. Did you want to start off with your thoughts, Jack?
I could start with my thoughts. At the earlier portion during the applicant, during the public hearing, we did have a finding that a proper verified pleading was introduced for a petition to intervene on this with 5 specific factual allegations. By filing that petition, the intervener gained the right to, amongst other things, the ability to present expert testimony on the 5 points to show that there is a reasonable likelihood that the activities that the conduct is reasonably likely to have the effect of unreasonable polluting, impairing, or destroying the public trust, in our case specifically of wetlands and watercourses. A key portion here has been done in case law numerous times, is that the burden of proof is on the intervener, and that the intervener must be presenting expert testimony to document that proof. The interveners in this case presented a large amount of data to us. Much of that data was not within the purview of this commission, such as the data on possible air pollution from the idling of trucks. The wildlife, their factual allegation on wildlife was accepted in the finding of the initial pleading, because there could be a chance that expert testimony could have shown how that would have reasonable likelihood of unreasonable pollutant, impairing, or destroying. Lighting, the need to have other permits from other agencies is not within the purview of this agency. A few other items in general that they presented, they talked about the possible pollution from truck washing, of which the applicant assured us there will not be any truck washing going on. We are required to accept that at face value unless there is specific evidence showing that that is not true. Now where am I here? In regards to wetland mapping, yes, the intervener showed that there have been different maps, wetlands mappings for this plot of land. The mapping was done by the applicant, and it was confirmed by a third party, a disinterested party, that the mapping shown. The old maps, in this case, we don't know why or how they were done, and has been shown and confirmed in court cases, the current reality is what we must deal with, and the current reality was mapped and the mapping confirmed, as was shown by the applicant with the minor changes that were made after the third disinterested party confirmation. The fact that the intervener did not have their own soil scientist present, the timing of the confirmation was done at their request, and the fact that they failed to show up at the timing that they requested does not render the work that was done invalid. Now, to get into the specific allegations made, the application proposed activities will directly introduce pollutant into the wetlands through the use of mechanized equipment and leakage of various fuels, oils, lubricants, and other man-made waste products on the proposed site. The applicant has proposed methods to mitigate that, and there was no expert testimony given that the proposed methods by the applicant would fail, or that the proposed activities would have, again, the reasonable, likely to have the effect of unreasonable polluting, impairing, or destroying. The alteration of topography on the site proposed by the applicants will cause direct alteration of hydrology on the site. Again, the hydrology on the site was looked at. The conclusion from the experts was that it will not have a significant impact, and that it probably will not be significantly changed due to the presence of the ponding. And again, no expert testimony was presented to refute that or to show how any proposed activities, an alteration of the hydrology would be reasonably likely to have the effect of unreasonable polluting, impairing, or destroying. The alteration of the topography of the site proposed by the applicants will directly impact certain species of vegetation, mammals, birds, reptiles, amphibians, and insects, which may be protected by state and federal law. As I mentioned earlier, it is not within the purview of this commission that other permits may be necessary. That would be within the purview of whatever is the appropriate agencies. Again, this is the one that, as I said earlier, that we left in case a case was made that showed how this was related to potential unreasonable polluting, impairing, or destroying of, as in purview of this commission, the wetlands and watercourses. And that was not done. Industrial use and increased runoff from construction activities will increase impervious surface area, decrease the vegetation, which may directly alter the water temperature in the wetlands. Again, there was no expert testimony given showing what the effect will be and how that would cause unreasonable polluting. They did not provide any information as to what water temperature changes were to be expected and how that would cause damage. There are other feasible alternatives to the applicant's proposed activity which would be less detrimental to the wetlands and watercourses present on site. There may be other feasible alternatives, and this commission would be getting into that if and when we get into a discussion on prudent and feasible alternatives. And again, for purposes of this commission, it's not just are there feasible, but there must be prudent and feasible alternatives. And again, there was no expert testimony showing that the alternative proposed and any feasible and prudent alternatives would have the likely effect of unreasonable polluting, impairing, or destroying. Therefore, on this finding, I intend to vote nay.
I appreciate the thought that you put into that. Okay. And I'd like to just hear from the other commissioners as to their thoughts on the original motion or in reaction to what Jack has said. I wish we had our round table. We could discuss better. Okay.
Each commissioner should go on record as to
To what
why they are voting the way they are planning to vote.
Thank you. I could
I'll
start at
start it
an
off.
end, or we'll get a volunteer and get,
You know, as a commission, we're chartered by, the state of Connecticut to uphold their regulations on watercourses and wetlands. That's really kind of all we do. We also do a lot to do with drainage issues and things like that. But, if we focus in on the wetlands aspect of this project, and what the impact is, we're eliminating, I think, a little over 2/10 of an acre of what turn out to be ditches, watercourses. And as mitigation, the applicant has offered.
Dick, could you get a little bit closer to your mic so the folks can hear you better?
Sorry.
You can pull the mic forward towards you. Can't you?
The
No.
applicant has offered, a little over 3/10 of an acre. And when I look at this, I look at the what we're giving up as far as, functioning wetland type issues. And this drainage ditch was a ditch that was put in there, 30, 40 years ago to drain the field. Since then, there's been, residential built up around, and it is kind of not only lost its purpose, but if you observe it over even this summer where there was a lot of rain, the ditch rarely had any water in it, and if it did, it was over a very short period of time after the storm. We had, ecologist reports and wetlands science reports, 2 or 3 of them, and they all came up with the same conclusion, that the functionality of that ditch is as a wetlands source or a value is pretty near zero. For that, we got as mitigation, because the applicant wants to eliminate them and put a big building right there. So as mitigation, which is one of the driving things that we always in this commission have to consider, because development is a right, protection of the wetlands is our job. So we got to balance the two. And I think in his offering of putting a wetlands in the western portion of the property, next to a current viable existing wetlands at a very consistent elevation, is going to be, if anything, give us something that is more valuable than what we're giving up. And it's even bigger in size. So to me, this, it is not an issue. And, for that, it's really one of the easier things in my mind to reconcile, because the wetlands piece of it is really almost a win for us, because we're getting something that's better and bigger. And it's kind of, hey, Jack, have we done, prudent and feasible alternatives yet?
no,
Okay.
we're going to have 3 motions ultimately.
Okay.
There's the first motion for discussion on whether or not the intervener proved that there would be, the phrase of
Reasonably
Reasonably-
likely to have the effect of unreasonable
Reasonable
polluting,
pollution.
impairing, or destroying of the public trust.
Okay, So then we need to decide that.
Okay.
Second, there'll be a motion on whether the proposal, like, we had the public hearing because there was a potential for a significant impact.
I got you. I
So
just
we'll have to
wasn't sure.
decide whether the proposed impact is significant or not.
Well,
And then the third thing would be, if the commission goes that far, up or down on the application itself. And there is overlap, because I hear in what you're saying, you know, the unreasonable harm is somewhat mitigated in this case.
I guess the other thing I would just add to the first item we're talking about is, you know, the overall stormwater management system is by all standards even more robust than is required. And I kind of like the fact that there's a big detention basin that allows for sediment to settle out and then travel down. And the underground storage areas that have filtration in them. So it's a fairly beyond normal design type levels of you know, robustness, I guess. So you know, this plan has got a lot of things going for it as far as minimizing impact on, you know, downstream water courses and pollution. That's all.
Good, thank
Uh,
you.
Barbara? Then on the potential motions, depending upon how we vote on a finding of significant impact, we may have to have a finding on prudent and feasible alternatives.
Yes. Thank you. Yep. Decision tree, okay. All right. Okay, so thank you. So can...
Jeff, or Jack, well stated there on the 5 points. I do agree, you know, at face value to everything you had stated. I feel that the information presented, you know, there were, you know, points referenced here, and I did not hear expert testimony, you know, trying to put forward many of these items, and agree exactly as you stated it, Jack.
Thank you. Well, and thank
So, you know, I agree with all the points that Jack brought forth. You know, one of the things, all of us are, most of us are citizens of this town. And I think all of us up here take the responsibility of protecting our wetlands, you know, very seriously. It's something that when applicants come before us, we depend on science, you know, soil scientists, engineers, to look at parcels that come before us and have reasonable solutions for problems that affect our wetlands. And although the interveners brought a lot of information, I mean, there was no question in my mind that they tried to research all the issues that affect this application, but none of it I found to be counter the science that was brought before us by the engineers, the soil scientists, the people that we depend on to help guide us in our deliberation on any application. You know, we sat here and we listened to the different facts that were brought before us, but honestly, none of them really addressed a lot of the information that was brought to us by scientists, by engineers. And you know, for that reason, I concur with Jack's assessment. You know, great job, Jack, in putting that together for our commission. So that's the way I looked at the intervener's presentation.
Thank you. All right, we've 3 more to hear from. Who's next? Dan, do you want us, are you ready? Paul?
Sure. It appeared to me that the applicant has done a lot of work in taking care of any of the wetland issues. And no one has come forth and said that none of what they propose will work. So you have to assume that what they propose to do is going to work and protect the wetlands as they need to.
Thank you. Jim, please.
I think the main question in all of this was how much of the area is wetland? And I think that the verification that was done showed an up-to-date, the up-to-date situation, which the amount of wetland was very limited. So I think that was settled in my mind.
Thank you. All right, Dan?
Yeah, agreed from a factual standpoint with a third-party soil scientist. I didn't see anything other than from the intervener status that changed my opinion. I agree with what you came up with.
So people have spoken to the relative scope of the wetlands compared to the project. They've spoken to presence or absence of expert testimony. They've spoken to the relative value of the existing versus the mitigation, not in a lot of detail. I think that comes later. Okay. All right, any further discussion on the motion as to whether or not the intervener petition made the case for reasonably likely unreasonable harm? Okay, then we'll call for a vote. Maybe it should be a roll. Maybe we'll just go down the line and vote. I'll go this way and that way so that it can be recorded. So, all right. In favor, not in favor?
Nay.
Okay.
Nay.
Dan?
Nay.
Paul?
Nay.
Dick? Adam?
Nay.
And Jim?
Nay.
Okay, then we have unanimous finding that the petition failed to state that case. Okay. All right. Now it's significant impact. We haven't had an intervener in quite a while. We're
Yes.
checking the notes and I'm
Section 11.3 of our regulations, in the case of an application which received a public hearing pursuant to a finding by the agency that the proposed activity may have an impact
a significant.
on wetlands and watercourses, a permit shall not be issued unless the agency finds on the basis of the record that a prudent and feasible alternative does not exist.
So first we need to determine
So
if
So first, we need a finding of significant impact on the wetlands and watercourses. So again, I'm going to put this motion in the affirmative. Move a finding of significant impact on wetlands and watercourses.
Okay, is there a second to that motion? So-
Second?
Okay, thank you, Jim. All right, discussion then.
I guess I can start off again. The watercourses, in this case, watercourses involved here, sometimes referred to as ditches, but more accurately referred to as watercourses. Their primary purpose was groundwater discharge. the proposed application, proposed activity with the ponding that they're doing there will still maintain that function. The secondary potential function was providing hydrology on off-site in the one watercourse before it then flows into a municipal storm sewer system. The use of the roof water, partial roof water, will be maintaining that source of water into that portion of the watercourse. Therefore, on this one, I too, again, am going to vote nay.
And I guess in the notes, wetland number 1 also had in the function and value assessment indicated sediment or toxogen or pathogen retention and nutrient removal, retention, or transformation. And existing stormwater structures as proposed are going to hold not just the first inch, but the first 3 inches, and they're going forward with fairly robust, beyond the minimum requirements of stormwater renovation. I just want to comment on those two. That was not listed as, although it's partial function, it's not a primary function of wetland 2, but it was of wetland 1. Okay. All right, so anyone else comment? So we should probably should we go on the record, or?
I just have to agree
thoughts
as
or comments?
proposed.
Pardon?
I would have to agree as proposed. They seem to have checked all the boxes.
So, comment.
Yeah, and absolutely agree. The proposed application relative to what we're experiencing currently on the lot, I agree that the proposed large catch basin, wetland mitigation on the west side of the property, introduction to clean water into existing wetlands that are being maintained on the property, all serve as improvements, even though there is an elimination occurring on the site.
All right, and then here's where there's some overlap with some of the comments you were making about mitigation, if you want to.
I think what Adam said is true. There's things that are being done to improve the overall health of the wetlands in the area. It's something that we have to, through mitigation, always resolve issues when there are wetlands issues and weigh what the value is of what we're losing versus the value of what we're getting. And I think this application gives us a positive for, the wetlands that are on the property are going to be healthier, and one of the wetlands, even if it'll be a larger wetlands than it is now, and will be, more apt to have wetland wildlife and plantings, and just be a better wetlands ecosystem.
Thank you. Does anyone?
One of the challenges that many applicants face when they come before a commission is to see if there's ways that they can improve the water quality of the plan that they develop. And, a lot of the commissioners have been on this commission for quite some time. I've only been on it for a couple of years, and I will tell you that, this plan probably has done an outstanding job, I think, to not only address the issues and the definitions of the property they're developing, but I think they have done a great job in trying to improve the wetlands, the quality of the water, and had some great solutions. And I think they didn't do just the minimum to get this project done.
Thanks. All right, then if there's any other comments?
I agree that the applicant has done what's necessary to take care of anything they create. So they're not adding to the water pollution. They're actually cleaning it to some extent.
So essentially offsetting any law.
Right.
All right, got that. All right, understood. All right. Everybody's quiet. All right, so no, if there's no more discussion then, or you have a comment? Yeah. I thought a hand went up, or was it, okay. There's a lot of reflections in the glass, and motions are funny sometimes. All right, then we'll call for a vote, and can we go down and just do it, the yay or nay down the line again? I think that helped last time.
Nay.
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 Hey,
Nay.
Question. I didn't get the question.
Oh, this is the finding on whether or not will be a significant impact. This application is going to cause a significant impact or not on
Nay.
the wetland. Okay, thanks. All right, then that was unanimous nay. All right, then. So now, we did not have the finding of a significant impact. So we don't need to weigh in, but we can discuss that in discussion of the motion if we want. All right, is there anyone who would like to make an overall motion on this application?
Okay. Move to approve application, what's the number on it again? 21-36P. Standard terms and conditions. Bonding recommendation, Jeff?
I'd recommend bond for establishment and maintenance of erosion and sediment controls during construction of $50,000. I would also recommend a bond for installation of the stormwater structures and the installation of the wetland mitigation area of $100,000. The bond to be kept for 3 growing seasons to ensure proper establishment of the wetland mitigation area.
Okay.
All right.
I have 2 other conditions that I would like to have added on to this, because the created wetland will have what is effectively a lawn area near it, surrounding it. I have conditioned that that area shall not be cut more than once a year, preferably in the fall, so that it can act properly as to protect the created wetlands. Second, this approval is based on a specific design, a specific size building, a specific arrangement of parking and impervious areas, and that if there are any changes when the actual design is done, that they must come before this commission again to verify that the changes do not alter the findings that were made on this application. Does anybody else see other specific approvals they'd like to have added?
I'd like to clarify the two, and where you're talking about the once-a-year mowing around the created wetland, that not be planted in turf grass, but that be planted in an appropriate either wetland or meadow mix,
Accepted.
okay? And that
The-
your comment on no changes should include a reference to the representation that was made that there'd be no vehicle washing in particular, and that
Okay.
if vehicle washing was allowed, that definitely would have to come back
Okay.
and would require,
So an additional condition of there shall be no vehicle washing and/or vehicle maintenance other than that necessary on an emergency basis for maintenance.
without it, and that if that's to be done, it comes back
Yeah.
for a review of appropriate measures.
If that is a concern of the commission, I would also recommend that the commission make a recommendation to planning and zoning, that if planning and zoning approves this application, that it also be a condition of approval, unless such time that a facility specific to truck washing be actually proposed and constructed on the site.
We can
We'll do that.
do that after the motion is closed, voted on.
Okay. All right.
Jack,
Have any others? Did anyone else have any other?
Jack, in talking to Jeff, that westerly 20-foot strip that borders the new wetlands and the existing wetlands that you probably only mow once a year?
Yes, so that it will,
Pardon?
yes, that's so that it be mowed once a year so that it can function as a buffer zone.
Right, Jeff suggested a wildflower mix that would be mowed in the fall. And what I would maybe also add to that is, to the northerly section there's going to be a fair amount of grass that's kind of mostly in the 80-foot upland area that butts against where the trucks come in. That ought to be limited to, we ought to not have any chemical fertilizers or weed killers used in that area. Anything that's eco-friendly is fine, but I think anything that's got a pesticide in it should be, just off limits for that section.
Okay,
All right.
I had one other, I don't know if it got changed in the plans or not, but Carla Pasta had a request that the inspection, on the detention basin be done more frequent than 5 years
5
because
years.
of their concern. I don't think that's been changed on the plans, but they suggested 3 years, and what we should stipulate also is that the firm be experienced in the mechanical and the environmental aspects of the drainage system, so that it gets a full top-to-bottom analysis every 3 years. I imagine if everything's going well after a bunch of years, they may be able to cut that back, but I think for the first bunch of years, to make sure everything's well established, because that basin really is going to be an area which is going to be developed into kind of a wetland area with wetland plants, and it could generate some very reasonable wetlands environment for things to propagate. I know interveners were worried about where the animals are going to get their water, and where some of the, turtles that they saw, where are they gonna go? They're obviously okay now because there's no water where we're changing it, but they're gonna be in a habitat that's got a basin that's gonna be wet year-round. It's gonna be, for certain species, it's gonna be a good thing.
So the inspection frequency and maintenance, that maintenance would include removal of invasive. I would,
Yes, yeah, that's pretty much standard these days with it. That should include, and I think the evaluation of the success of, again, the plantings would also include an evaluation of invasive species, either taking hold or promulgating, so.
so any other
Anybody second?
conditions?
Is this anyone second? Second to the
Yeah.
motion?
Yeah, I'm just making sure we don't have any other conditions to add, and then we need the second, so. No other conditions? Were you right there on the second? Did you want to make the second? All right. So now there's the motion with conditions and a second. So now we have discussion on the merits of the application.
I guess I can start again. As has been mentioned in some of the other motions by other commissioners, the applicant here seems to have done a very good job of designing a system that will handle the necessary stormwater with the created wetlands. They are recreating some of the functions with the infiltrators, with the stormwater ponds. They are, and with the roof leader systems, they are recreating or enhancing the current functions. And I would say, in general, they did an excellent job at it.
Okay. Any other?
I think the design professionals did all they could to, isolate this project from the residential it abuts. The berms that they built, the plantings, the increased buffers between the residential and the building, in the parking, the moving of all the loading docks to the west side, which kind of faces where Carla Pizza is, so it's pretty much away from all the residential lots that are there. I think the design that they've come up with is about the best they could do for a building of that size that's going to be that close to a residential area. And, you do the best you can to isolate things, and I think they've done that.
So the flip side of that is that the basin, there's the large basins, the berms and those areas are toward a residential area rather than toward more industrial area. And it's toward a residential area that spoke toward appreciating some of the wildlife values that aren't particularly wetlands, but that can come with that area, or that type of.
Yeah, the zoning regs call for, I think, 50 feet, and it's 150 feet, and what we came up with. It's given the residential area, about the maximum distance away that they could do and still have a viable project.
All right, does someone else want to speak to the? I guess at this point, I'd like to just readdress a comment Jack briefly made about the wetland delineation, and that we need to go by what is currently found to be on the site. And based on the information presented, and I'm very comfortable with the delineation and the effort and work that, that went into making that's an accurate representation of what wetland, poorly drained soils we have on the site. And so I'm comfortable that way. We heard, is there any other comments? And here, okay, then I'll just, would repeat or just ask people to remember, the comments about the functions and values that got identified for the wetlands, and the fact that while they're not the natural wetlands, but that the structural and the best management practices and the stormwater practices are addressing the primary functions in terms of the groundwater, the nutrient and pathogen removals. Right. And the other just general observation, I guess, the value of these wetlands, the water course, as it leaves the site, it enters pipes. So it's the removal and replacement of the functions, doesn't seem to me like the same as if it was part of a downstream, very natural environment. Okay. Any other thoughts? All right. So, all right, if there's no other discussion, then I guess we'll call for a vote on the motion to approve. I guess we need to address, shall we say anything about prudent and feasible, or no? Just for the record state.
We did not have a finding of significant impact.
And so therefore, the finding of prudent and feasible alternatives is not required.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Then, all in favor of the motion as presented?
Aye.
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 We've got it. All right. Is there anyone opposed to the motion? Okay, no one is opposed. Is there anyone abstaining on this motion? And no one is abstaining. Then the permit is granted for application 21-36P.
With the conditions.
With the conditions, yeah, with the conditions as, that was in the motion. Conditions in the motion. Okay. All right, and we've got those. All right. Long agenda. Then we're on to the next item of business.